So these are real easy. Mic check, 1, 2, 3. Don't pay any attention to me, just final mic check, 1, 2, 3. Is this going on live on YouTube? You hear me all right? Perfect. Thank you for your patience.
Good evening. The University of Arizona sits on the traditional homeland of the Tohono O'odham Nation and the adopted homeland of the Pasquayaqui Nation. For hundreds of generations, they have stewarded the lands in this region. It is thus an institutional responsibility to recognize and acknowledge these peoples and their languages, cultures, and histories, all of which are woven into the fabric of our campus community. My name is Alain-Philippe Durand, and I am the Dean of the College of Humanities. Thanks for joining us at the 10th Annual Tucson Humanities Festival. 10 years ago, the College of Humanities started Humanities Week. Through community outreach, engagement, and incredible speakers, it has grown into the Tucson Humanities Festival, and now encompasses the entire month of October. This year, the theme for the festival is Next. And we are asking what's next for the humanities? How can the lessons of the past shape tomorrow? Who are tomorrow's leaders, innovators, communicators, thinkers? I wish to thank our Poetry Center and its director extraordinaire, Tyler Meyer, for inviting, and our acclaimed guest speaker, Sandra Cisneros, here tonight. The Poetry Center is a centerpiece of the College of Humanities and an internationally renowned literary institution with an outstanding staff. Indeed, I would like to acknowledge our world-class staff and faculty and celebrate with you some fantastic news. We just found out yesterday that according to the US News and World Report's Best Global Universities rankings in the category of arts and humanities, the University of Arizona is ranked 30th in the world and number 9 among US public institutions. Tonight's reading is a celebration of an inspirational and beloved writer and an expression of the values of the College of Humanities and the University of Arizona's commitment as an Hispanic-serving institution. A few young guests here tonight share Sandra Cisneros' drive to tell stories of their own. The Poetry Center's Writing the Community is a school-based creative writing program for K-12 students with the goals of developing creative and critical thinking skills. Some of their work is on display by Sandra's book signing table for you to enjoy after the reading. I would like to thank the other sponsors who helped make tonight's event possible. Bookman's Entertainment Exchange, our Humanities Seminars program, Chicanos por la Causa, and Arizona Humanities. Chicanos por la Causa is one of the largest Hispanic nonprofits in the country, promoting stronger and healthier communities throughout the southwestern United States. Arizona Humanities is the Arizona chapter of the National Endowment for the Humanities. I have the pleasure of serving on the board of directors, so I am very familiar with Arizona Humanities. We give grants to schools, libraries, and museums across the state, which help us bring outstanding cultural programs to you, like our reading this evening with Sandra Cisneros. You can find out more at the table in the lobby or go to the website azhumanities.org. We have here tonight Arizona Humanities, Bookman's, Chicanos por la Causa, Humanities Seminars, and Poetry Centers board members and staff. May I ask them to please stand so they can be acknowledged. Thank you very much. It is now my pleasure to introduce Manuel Munoz, who will introduce our esteemed speaker and then lead the discussion after. There will also be a book signing after the event, and you will be receiving more information a little bit on. Manuel Munoz is the author of a novel, What You See in the Dark, and 2 short story collections. He is the recipient of fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts and the New York Foundation for the Arts. He has been recognized with several awards and an appearance in this year's Best American Short Stories. One of his first encounters with Sandra Cisneros' work was via an imitation exercise at UC Santa Cruz Equal Opportunity Program for Central Valley High School students in the summer of 1988. Mr. Munoz is currently the director of the University of Arizona's Creative Writing Program. Please welcome Manuel Munoz.
Thank you. Bienvenidos. Y buenas tardes. It's always hard in in autumn. Is it buenas tardes or buenas noches? I can't tell. Can I take you back to a moment in childhood, recognizable to some, but maybe not all, when your whole family is gathered around to watch you do something. Maybe sing a song like Celaya does in the novel Caramelo, or take a turn at bat in a family game of softball, or play with the new toy that your older siblings want to get a crack at first, even though it's yours, and you fail. Don't do so well. And the tío in the back lets out a sound. But you give it, as Sandra likes to say, el try, to fail better. Va a salir bonito, you'll see. But it doesn't work. And this time, it's a tía who you can hear. Ooh. And then finally, this time con ganas, you try it one more time and still nothing. Ni modo. This time, you hear actual words. Oh, que la. That's how it was for me trying to write this introduction. What to say about someone like Sandra that hasn't been said already? I could give you the list of accolades because you should know that she's a MacArthur, the recipient of a MacArthur Genius Grant. And you should know that she used the MacArthur to help establish the Macondo Writers Workshop, a haven for writers in our community for almost 25 years now. I could tell you about the house on Mango Street and how many middle school and high school students across the country have read it, how many writers' lives it has inspired, how many poets, how many visual artists, how many dancers, how many teachers, how many parents grateful to have a book in their hands that brings reading and experience across the generations. I could tell you about a house of my own, stories from my life, the intimate book of essays that starts to answer the question many often ask of Sandra: how did you do it? How did you make a poet's life? How did you find a house of your own? And the answers take you to Mexico, to Provincetown, to San Antonio, to Greece, and crucially, they remember and honor other writers. The poet Luis Omar Salinas, the magnificent Gwendolyn Brooks, my favorita, que descansen en paz. I could tell you about Caramelo, the dazzling novel of memory and family, the intimacy and intricacy of storytelling, and the directions it might take you if you decide to put your own cuento to paper. You're the author of the telenovela of your life, all right, the book says. Comedy or tragedy, choose. Or I could simply take delight in Sandra's style, her poetic elevation of the humble simile, which is really the elevation of our very Mexican way of talking. Exagerado and believable only because she invites our imaginations to do the comparisons. My favorite line from The House on Mango Street: love is like a big black piano being pushed off the top of a 3-story building, and you're on the bottom waiting to catch it. Or this blurb about the poet Richard Blanco: sad, tender, and filled with longing, like an old photograph, a saint's statue worn by the devout, a bolero on a radio on a night full of rain. Me emocionan, there's no other way to say it. They emotion me. Or for fiction writer Denise Chavez: I love this book so much it sounds like I'm lying. Those of us who know Spanish and who have sometimes had it corrected all our lives can hear the deliberate word-for-word translation, but it's asserted now as our music, our mistaken speech is pure poetry. Everywhere in Sandra's books, you will see the push and pull of family, how we talk to each other, how we learn to listen to that poetry, how to transform what others want us to be ashamed about into the glory of what it means to come together. It is at the heart of Sandra's presence in this world as a writer, the forming of community, the reaching out to others to invite them in, to share in reading, in creating, or in simply listening to one another's cuentos. We consider her a great friend to the Tucson community, and I want to thank her one more time for the visit 7 years ago when she came alongside my mentor, Elena Maria Viramontes, to observe the American Library Association's 30th anniversary of Banned Books Week, and she used that occasion to protest HB 2281, which had banned Mexican American studies at Tucson High School right across the street. Without fail, without hesitation, she can tell you that access to books, that a chance to listen and tell your own poems can change your life. It certainly changed mine way back in 1988 as a 16-year-old when a grad student named Francis, who I have never been able to track down even in this age of social media, gave me a writing prompt that was really a mirror to my own life. 6 years later, on May 2nd, 1994, at the Cambridge Public Library, I stood in line to meet one of my literary idols, and my college friend, Paul Martin, blurted out for me, "He wants to be a writer." And Sandra wrote in this book, "Dale gas." And those words have carried me all the way here, 25 years later, with the honor of introducing her to you and to say, con mil gracias, gracias, y más, y todavía más. Sandra Cisneros.
You're going to make me cry. I think if I was one of the tias now, after hearing that introduction, I'd say, mira, no más. Look at you. Look at you. Gracias. What a beautiful introduction. I'm so grateful. I know how hard it is to write those because I've had to do it. I still do it. I'm a member of Penn San Miguel, where I live, and I always get people to come to San Miguel, and then I have to write the introduction. I think, why did I invite them? Too much work. It's a lot of lata. It's a lot of lata, so I appreciate it. Thank you, Daventaste. Qué bonito. And you said we met in, cuando? I don't remember. Must be early Alzheimer's. No sé. I just can't. I don't remember anymore. I can't believe you're all here tonight to hear me because I'm the only daughter in a family of 6 boys. And, there never was like time for each of us when you have that many children. You always got to share everything. You want a slice of pie, you got to divide it up by 9. You get a little piece of pie when you divide it by 9, let me tell you. So, I love when there's this many people. I just love it. And I thank you for coming out. You look nice. Thank you. And coming out and making the effort to be here tonight and support this series. I want to thank the dean who speaks so beautifully. I could listen to that accent all night. You could just read your grocery list. I say, "Ay, qué bonito." Hi, qué bonito. And I want to thank all the sponsors, the multiple sponsors, but especially I want to thank Tyler Meyer, the director of the Poetry Center. Yes. Thank you. And the reason why I want to thank you is because I very rarely get invited by writing centers. So it's nice to talk to writers. Thank you. And thank you for remembering I'm a poet. Most people don't think about that, so thank you. And because you invited me, I had to finish some new poems. So not to disappoint you. And I know tonight is called Puro Amor, but I'm not going to read from Puro Amor. This is my last book, so I'm just going to make a little commercial. This is my last book. The drawings are by me, and they're of animals I have known. Usually I draw with the same pen that I write with, and I draw people's dogs that I know because they don't mind being nude models. I don't have to pay them. And usually I catch them when they're sleeping. But anyway, so this book is my latest book. It's a chapbook, and I began my writing career with a chapbook. It's a very rare book called Bad Boys, but the Poetry Center has it. So, and I want you to know, that chapbook, when I didn't get paid for that book. It was Lorna D. Cervantes, poet, and Gary Soto, poet, that at a time when nobody would publish me except other Chicano writers. And I remember that Lorna had a press called Mongo Press, and it was stapled, with a stapler at home, but the stapler didn't do all the pages, so Gary had to use a spoon to get the pages. And they paid me 500 copies of my book. That's how I got paid. And I would always, the poets, they're always carrying a bag. You want to buy a book? Want to buy a book? And my book then cost $1. And now, if you can find it, I'm told it cost over $1,000. Isn't that amazing? So if you see a young poet out there, buy his book. You never know, right? Okay. So I thank you for recognizing that I wrote poetry. I studied poetry, but I was always a poet and a fiction writer. However, when I was a young student in graduate school at 21 years old, I had to claim poetry or fiction. You had to be a citizen of one or the other. You couldn't be a dual citizen, Nobody had that imagination. But now I realize, I always liked to write poetry and fiction and something in between. And now I draw. And right now I'm working on a libretto of House of Mango Street with Derek Bermel. We're working on an opera. So if there's any millionaires out there who want to help us, you see me right afterwards. But I'm working on lots of other things. So when I hear these accolades, I think, I'm just getting started. Please, I'm only 64. And I'm just getting started and doing all kinds of new things. Textiles with text, the libretto, and singing. I do all kinds of things, which is nice, because when you get to be in your 60s, you don't care what other people think. That's the truth. You just don't care. And so finally you think, what do I want? And that's the great thing about getting older. I want to thank the people that came out here. I have family members that, who knew I had family that lives in Arizona? Where's my family? Where's my family? They're supposed to be, stand up, family. That's not Ed and Maxine Alfaro. Stand up. Stand up. Yeah, and you know, Ed found out we were related from watching Finding Your Roots on PBS, right? That's how we knew we were related. And I was a little worried about meeting him. Maybe he wasn't worried about me. He knew about me, but I didn't know about him. And we had a wonderful dinner yesterday in El Barrio Viejo, ¿verdad? And the best part is that I got to eat the leftovers. That was really, really good. But anyway, the episode that you met me, Finding Your Roots, is going to be repeated. If you didn't catch it, it'll be on Thanksgiving week, and you can catch it, catch the time on your PBS listing. Okay? And one of the things I knew is that I am the daughter of a Mexican immigrant, and I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud. My father served in the U.S. Army, and that's how he became a U.S. citizen. And I am the granddaughter of Mexican abuelos who came across during the Mexican Revolution, and they could not read nor write, and they did not know how to read or write until they were elders. So when I think about the opportunities that have come my way to allow me to be here today, to speak, it really is a miracle. I'm filled with gratitude for the courage of my abuelas to cross during a violent time, the most violent time of the revolution happened in the region they were from in 1915. And imagine a man who couldn't read or write coming first, saving money, bring his wife, bring his mother-in-law, bring his brother-in-law, and my grandma had babies already, and they died along the way, and some were born in the cities that they came up, El Paso, Flagstaff, Rocky Ford, Colorado, Kansas, and that Railroad Center, Chicago, where I was born. So their life story is quite amazing, and they inspire and give me courage for the work that we do, because being a writer takes a lot of courage. And there was a lovely little boy yesterday at the school I visited, and he asked the question, I was like, how do you find the courage? I thought, wow, he was like 12? I said, the New York Times doesn't ask me questions like that, What a beautiful question, because writing takes courage, but I think it also takes courage to just be an American in this time. This is a time when we have to be bigger and smarter and wiser and kinder and more compassionate and more human. And I think it's good that the title of this talk is Puro Amor, even though I'm not going to read from that book. I want everyone to speak and think and act with Puro Amor. I'm inspired by the great man who recently died when I was in Baltimore last week, Elijah Cummings. He spoke with courage. He spoke with courage. And I think of him and I think, wow, I want to be that brave. Because I think of a poem that I reach for when I'm frightened and I see so much fear. When we're living in times of fear, sometimes we don't come from a place of calmness and wisdom, and we just react, and that's happening now. So I think of my friend Joy Harjo's poem. It's the title poem in her book, A Conflict Resolution for Holy Beings. And I don't feel I'm as courageous or as wise as Joy, so I reached for that poem. And there's a line that says, you must speak in the language of justice. And I think we need to remind ourselves of that every day and think of Elijah Cummings, because he certainly spoke in the language of justice. And it's our job. I think we can't expect the politicians to do everything. I think it's our job to be more human and to change things for the better. Because I live in Mexico now, and I can tell you when I cross, I feel that fear. And the other side of fear is rage that's roiling and dividing us. So I'm going to remind everybody to do great work, be inspired by Elijah Cummings, and to speak in the language of justice, and to treat everyone con puro amor y más amor. That's my sermon for today. I have to say that because I don't see any of the politicians saying that, regardless of which party. So we have to do we have to do everything ourselves? Yes, we do. Yes, we do. So anyway, I'd like to also thank my friend Nada Caraula. Where's Nada Caraula? Nada is someone I met through Yasna Caraula, who's in my book. She's my Yugo sister. And I met her in Sarajevo. And anyone who has lived in a war will understand why we have to be very careful with the language we speak and with every thought that we use, that we act every day with Puro Amor. But I visited Sarajevo before the war and after. And recently when I was there, I was so jet-lagged. And I ate too much chirap, she said, which is, I can't remember how to pronounce it, but I always call it shut up, she said. And it's like gyros. It's like Yugoslav gyros, shut up, she said. Something like that. But I ate too much, and it has salt. And it gave me vertigo, which if you've never had vertigo, it's not like an Alfred Hitchcock movie. No, vertigo is like someone put you on the merry-go-round and started swinging it, but you haven't moved, and the whole world starts shifting. You haven't drunken any margaritas, but it feels like that. And I was so frightened, and I was in a foreign country, and my friend took me to the doctor because I went to sleep, and I said, "What's wrong with me?" And a little boy said, "Brain tumor." I said, "Oh, no. Oh, no." And as I told the doctor, she says, "No, you don't have a brain tumor." I said, I know I sound like Woody Allen, but could I have an MRI? So they gave me an MRI, and I just had this delivered thanks to Nada. So thank you for bringing my MRI. Okay? All right. Thank you. All right. Well, I live in Mexico now. How did that happen? Well, you have to read the last chapter of A House of My Own because, our lives are more astonishing than our imagination. So now I live in Mexico in a town that's an hour and a half from the village where my ancestors fled from, and they never came back. But 100 years later, I went back. And this is a poem based on Cavafy, the wonderful Greek Egyptian poet. And he has a book, a poem called House with a Garden. And you know how I love houses. So this is house. I don't have a house with a garden. I have a house with a rooftop garden. I'd like a house with a rooftop garden with great pots of geranios in rich shades the color of a fertile uterus, órganos, girasoles, magueys, and aceitunas, of course, but especially for los animalitos. 4 dogs to announce when invaders arrive and withdraw, snouts aimed at the sky, tails trembling like cobras, as well as birds, none caged, but from afar. Colibris, golondrinas, palomas, tecolotes. Best of all, the life-invigorating sensontle. I'd like someday a small donkey, even if only in the house of my imagination, nobly named Dionisio, Nemesio, or Saturnino. And on this burro, no one will ever be allowed to ride. Only small packages ferried from the San Miguel markets, or better yet, baskets of cempasúchil, nubes, nardos, to refresh the eyes of those in great need of joy. The facade of my home shall remain a modest monk color so as not to elicit the envy of the bitter and to keep for myself the luxury of my coral and lavender and eggplant interiors. And in the morning and at night, from the rooftop I will shout, Cacahuata! Lululuz! Osvaldo! Nahuiolin! Till all San Juan de Dios knows by heart the names of las criaturas de mi corazón. Okay. I'm going to read you some San Miguel poems. You know, I've had a very bad relationship with poetry lately. You know, it's kind of like we live with each other, but we don't speak. And I'm very mad at poetry because poetry won't do what I want it to do. And poems never do what you want it to do. So I've been waiting, you know, for poems to come around. Some have started to come out in Spanish, and then I translate them to English. But they're never like what I want them to be. I write about donkeys and flowers. I don't want to write about that. But, you know, that's what comes out. And I think, wow, these are such emergency times. We're living in such dark times. And burro poems come out, you know? I was like, what's going on? So anyway, I was telling a story to my assistant and his wife. And then I realized, oh, I need to write about that, something that happened on my street. And just in case you don't know how to say I love you in Spanish, how do you say I love you in Spanish? Let's ask. Te amo, right? I don't have to school this crowd. Okay, this poem is called Te A. And you know how they tell you when you take algebra and geometry and trigonometry in school that one day you will need it? No, I never needed it. Never, 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 until I wrote this poem. And I just I just debuted it with my two friends who are math professors at Texas State University, where my papers are, and they liked it, so I'm going to share it second time for you, okay? And it's the only time I needed my math. Te a. A boy and a girl embrace, kiss within the triangle of my parking space. A geometric equation proving the whole greater than the sum of the parts. Beyond the eye of church, traffic, and mothers, here in the privacy of a callejon that rolls soundlessly downhill, dissolves into the wall of the chapel of San Juan de Dios, patron of booksellers, alcoholics, and the sick, sufferers all. Even in a town named for an armed angel, love finds a route. A boy and a girl kiss, 7 mute organ cacti and a nicho Guadalupe as witnesses. To prove love is ever expanding in space and time, the boy drafts a valentine on the parking triangle's hypotenuse. My neighbor's stone wall. Te, sprayed in red block letters. Then across town, as narcos duly collect protection rent from tortilla vendors, even as townfolk regularly disappear like wallets routinely plucked from Costco customers' pockets, and lifetime savings are obediently stashed at bus stop trash bins per phone extortionist instruction, while gentle twilight descends, releasing, soundless as moths, serial rapists. The authorities move swiftly when children violate property owned by foreigners. Love, after all, is a dangerous conflagration, an axiom even Euclid would conclude. The boy is let go with a few slaps for his proper education. The girl wisely escaped at the first sight of uniforms and guns. And so as it was before and ever will be, the neighbor's wall is power hose to its former serenity, except for a faint pink scar. De, ah, de, ah, a song crowned with humility and thorns, extending into infinity, stigmata of the forlorn. Are there any mathematicians in the house? That was for you, honey. Okay. This is a companion poem to the other burro poem, another burro poem. Okay, this one's called I Should. You know how people have a bucket list? Like, I want to go see the Northern Lights, or I got to get a mean coat, or I want that black Lexus. Well, my bucket list is this poem, and I don't have to go anywhere. I should like to fall in love with a burro named Saturnino. I should like to fall in love with a burro named Saturnino and sleep murmuring that name as lullaby. Warm my bed with a xolo squinkly, the color of blue corn, and will myself to be reborn sunflower, ever faithful to the sun. I should like to learn to love with the monogamous passion of the parrot and the foolish valor of the chihuahua. I should love to dedicate my morning glory years to the inspirational ants who peacefully and without remorse or humor successfully evict me from my shower every winter, lessons in nonviolent persuasion. I have much to learn from the Sentinel McGay about fortitude, resilience, patience in this season of Los Santos Inocentes de la Política. And day by day, I am a student of the morning sky, and night by night, I memorize the sermon of the Guru Moon. Next to my door, there is an isle rope attached to a bronze bell announcing visitors. It does not ring when dawn arrives with her furious scent of bolillos, orange peels, and doorways flushing buckets of fabuloso across wet stone. Every day the same as the one before, and never as the one before. Each moment wrapped in newsprint and twine, and delivered always on time. You know, one of my favorite writers is Jan Beatty. Has Jan Beatty ever been here? She's in Pittsburgh, and I like her because her poems are a little bit scandalous. But for those of you who are under 12, don't worry. This is a G-rated reading, okay? And this is called My Mother and Sex. 8 live births. How many dead? Who knew? Not us, her 7 survivors. When a bedroom scene flashed on TV, she'd shriek and scamper to her room as if she'd seen a rat. It made us laugh. What were we? Immaculate conceptions? Could be sex for her was dead, a duty dreadful as cooking for her famished army. Sad to think this. Pure postulation from lack of conclusive conversation. She never talked of sex, especially not with me. She said I put everything in a book. Agreed. But what was worse, the truth or my imagination? What I know for sure, rapture for her, a library record symphony. Ecstasy, opera in the park. Intimate pleasure, books. Friday, Turkle, Chomsky, Herculean, brilliant men, unlike the man who shared her bed, who favored Sábado Gigante to Sebastião Salgado. And yet, Father spoiled her, his Mexican empress, Paricutin tempestuous, clueless to what she craved. Her red flare sent up weekends. Help! There's no intelligent life here! Evenings, in the blue moonbeam of TV, father mesmerized by Mexican thick-thighed floozies, mother's word, not mine, shaking their hoochie-coochies. Father never drank, ran off, split flesh, brought home each faithful Friday a paycheck. Why would she complain? She lived alone in a house full of lives by the time I knew her. Snake bitter, mingy, dead before being born, a woman in formaldehyde. This is our Father, Big Chief in heaven. Our Father, Big Chief in heaven, I sent my assistant Calixto to make an appointment with Her Highness, La Licenciada, who has left for lunch before noon, gone for the day, was fired or fled, who can tell, the third director at this post for 15 months. Deliver us from the mustache tenor who schedules at said institution, busy today waxing his whiskers. My will be done, thy kingdom come back tomorrow. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive El Notario, who ought to be called El Notorious, for having us wait 3 months for his return call so Calixto and wife can finally sign the deed on their first home, having given up on the call from their own notario, even slower than mine and already waiting weary. Everything on earth is done with papeles, signatures, patience, and the arrival of others whose destiny is out of our hands, especially if you are a native in this native land. Father, well, I know we should be grateful for our small pains in a nation where it's easier to break than follow law, where widows grieve without recompense or consolation, where limbs and heads of journalists are delivered in trash bags when they dare to print the truth, where dogs bite with impunity, masons fall from scaffolds in a puff of dust and broken bones, if lucky. Eternally glad are we for our small woes. Blessed are we to bed with all our appendages. Bless our winged tenor and la chiflada licenciada. Our future on their whims depend. Blessed be especially our notorious. One day may he yet sign our documents. Give us this day our plenitude of weight, and praise our politicians who teach us daily to endure. Stretch our hearts ample as a yawn, so we might accommodate the double-wide trailer of our neighbor's grief, and by comparison feel gratitude for our own misery without end. Amen. God breaks the heart again and again until it stays open. This is a quote from the Sufi Inayat Khan. And I think that that's true, that all of us who create art, we have to break our heart every time we write so we can feel things deeply. So if you're grieving, if you've lost someone and you have a broken heart, you're already in that state of grace where you feel terrible things deeply, but you're also open to feeling beautiful things deeply. And if you are in a broken heart state, that's the poet's state. And I encourage you to create, to go next to the oldest tree you can find, to go to the desert, talk to the saguaro. That's the artist state is always to be in that hypersensitive state. So God breaks the heart again and again until it stays open. But what if my heart is a 7-Eleven after its third daytime robbery in a week? if my heart is a piñata thrashed to tissue and peppermint shrapnel? What if my heart is a peeled mango bearing an emerald housefly? What if my heart is an air conditioner weeping a rosary of rusty tears? What if my heart is Sebastião Salgado's sinkhole swallowing another child? What if my heart is Death Valley and Wide View CinemaScope? What if my heart is a chupacabron chanting, "Build a wall"? What if my heart is the creepy uncle's yawning zipper? What if my heart is a Pentecostal babbling a river of tongues? What if my heart is the cross-eyed Jesus bought at the Poteet flea market? What if my heart is El Paso, Texas, in bed with the corpse of Ciudad Juarez? What if my heart is unhinged from the weight of its lice-ridden wings? What then for an encore, oh my soul, when you have blessed me 100-fold? Okay. Creed. I believe I am God, and you are too, and each and every one, but only for a little. I believe God is love, and love is God, and although some doubt God's existence, no one doubts the existence of love, even and especially those who have never met love. I believe we are capable of atrocities beyond imagination and equally capable of extraordinary God acts as well. I believe there's enough misery in the world, but also humanity, just a bit more, I believe. I believe in the power of a thought, a word to change the world. I believe there's no greater sorrow than that of a mother or father who has lost his child. I believe in las madres de las madres, y la Santísima Madre, la Diosa Guadalupe. Because the universe is large enough to encompass contradictions, I believe these same mothers sometimes create monsters, los machos. I believe mothers and grandmothers are the solution to violence, not only in Mexico, the United States, but across the globe. I believe what the generals need now are the abuelita brigades, armed with chanclas to shame, swat, and spank los mero machos del mundo. Amen. Okay. You know, that poem was written because in San Antonio, Texas, where I lived for more than half my life, the local news had their cameras, and there were all these police cars in front of a house where a lone gunman was holed up shooting. And a little abuela was walking down the street. She said, "What's going on here?" They said, "Oh, be careful. There's a gunman there. You have to be careful." She said, "What?" And she broke the police tape, and she went in there, and she came out with the gunman slapping him. That was her grandson. So we need the grandmother brigades going out there to those narcos that are buying the arms and selling the drugs, and we need someone to go to the White House too. No? Okay. Because we're never going to get out of this unless, I like what Thich Nhat Hanh said. Thich Nhat Hanh is my hero. And he said we need to ask our neighbors, how can I make you feel safe? How can I make you feel safe? And if everybody did that, just think what a better globe it would be if countries did that. No? It's so simple. How can I make you feel safe? If we worked at that, just think of how could we resolve our problems. I want to just read two more things. This is a poem called Canto for Women of a Certain Llanto after Dylan Thomas. I'd rather wear none than ugly underwear made for women of a certain age. Rage, rage, do not go into that good night wearing sensible white or beige. Women who have squash blossomed into soft flesh and grieve the frothy loss of the interior garments of youth. Rage, rage, do not go into that good night wearing sensible white or beige. You can help me with the chorus. Gone the black lace architecture of the past, the thong bikinis, hipsters, G-strings, gone, gone. The underwire and lace push-up cups replaced with feed sacks and ace bandage straps. Pachydermian, prosthetic, a cruel aesthetics. Rage, rage, do not go into that good night wearing sensible white or beige. Excellent women who in wise vision flower, blaze, scintillate in your finest era. Refuse the misnomer, intimate apparel, for what lies beyond XL or 36C is the antithesis of intimacy. Garments sent to exile, anima solas, to the Siberia of celibacy, to sleep with dogs or cats instead of lovers. Oh, La Perla, why hast thou forsaken us? Will no one take pity and design foundations, nay, lingerie, for women of exuberance? Something imaginative like Frank Lloyd Wright's Falling Water. In my imagination, I create a holster to pack my twin firearms, my 38-38s, a beautiful invention of oiled Italian leather, graced tobacco golden, whip-stitch hand-tooled with western roses and wing scrolls, mother-of-pearl snaps, and nipples capped with silver aureoles. And you, my mother, grazing from your chaparrita height, who has cursed and blessed me with your DNA, like so many Mexican women with a pillar for a torso, like Coatlicue. Magas, brujas, chingonas, rage, rage, do not go into that good night wearing sensible white or beige. I'll stop there. I'll stop there. I will stop there. I will stop there. And I give it to you, some businesswoman out there who will help remedy this situation. Okay? I give it to you to make $1 million. Okay, I think we're going to have Q&A now. Okay, no? At this hour? Okay, I'm putting on my glasses. And this way I could see you. And you can ask some brilliant questions. I love the questions. So please ask away. See? Andale. Oh, I'm going to sit over there? Oh, okay. Did you have a good time?
Sandra, that was fantastic, funny, wonderful. But I wanted to have a quick Q&A with you, just to ask you a couple of questions, but also to remind everybody after the Q&A to invite you to a book signing, which will be in the back of the room. There'll be a lot of people, I'm sure, that want to have some moments with Sandra, but it will be right over to the left after the end of the Q&A. We'll keep it brief. But I just wanted to start with one of the poems, given the theme tonight, Puro Amor, and your phrase, what if my heart? I called it the humble simile, and I was wondering if you could talk about why the simile is so important to your poetry.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I don't think like that,
Yeah.
you know. Well, that's not true. I do think like that, but I don't think of the question. I see things as one thing like another. My whole life, even as a little kid, I always would feel things and compare them to something else without knowing that I was a poet. I was a very quiet child. I was very shy. I was the little girl that never spoke in class. I was the little girl who thought she was ugly. I was the little girl who didn't get chosen for things. I was the girl who disappeared and was invisible. So it makes me so happy to hear that you all came out, to see you all, because I lived a childhood where I didn't have a voice. And then in different times in my life, I lost my public voice as well. Graduate school, most of college, and people think I wrote House on Mungo Street while I was at Iowa. I did write it, but not for credit and not for my class. It was like a side thing that I did to keep my spirit alive, and it just helped me to find my voice and my direction. So I think I've always been that little kid that was no one paid attention to in class. My teachers wouldn't guess that I would be here. I'm the most surprised. I'm the most surprised.
In terms of your life as a poet, and for the writers out in the room who are maybe having conversations with their family about their life choices and their directions, I'm thinking about something you wrote in your acknowledgments in Caramelo. You said, one of the most important moments of your life is my father's opposition to my life as a writer and my mother's support of my choice.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, my father didn't really understand what I was doing, but he wanted me to go to college since the first moment I spoke and made that intention. I was in like middle school, and I don't know where I got the idea, but I told my father I wanted to go to college, and he always supported me then all the way through except when I finished, and he said, all that education and still no husband. So he thought I was going to do like the Mexican women of his class. He's from middle class, and the Mexican middle class women go to college to major in marriage, you know. And so he thought I wasted all that and never got married. So that was his idea. My mom, on the other hand, just was always very supportive. They both regretted that they had not finished their schooling. My mother never finished 9th grade. My father never finished his first year of college, and as a result, he had to learn how to. He had to learn a craft, and my father was an upholsterer, and he was always exhausted. He would show us his blistered hands and his feet with corns, and he would say, study hard and use this, not this. And so, he wanted us to go to school, but me as the only girl, he just thought I would find someone who could take care of me. And I had this selfish dream. I would pray that my father lived long enough to understand why I had made all the sacrifices, why I had to move twice a year in my 30s and follow jobs, and why I was poor and slept on the floor. I just wanted my father to live long enough to understand. And, my father was always saying, oh, ay, pobrecita Sandra, ojalá que se case. Oh, if she would only get married. Oh, poor Sandra. And, he would think I didn't hear this because I'd be asleep on the couch in the living room. He'd talk above me, and I could hear him. And, he just wanted me to have kids and, get married and have kids, not have kids. Get married and have kids. And I was such a failure in his eyes. My brother, the doctor, was the success story. But when I won the MacArthur Award, my father couldn't believe it. He said how many years I would have had to work to make this sum. And he told me, mija, don't get married. He'll just take your centavos. He lived long enough, but then I knew destiny gives and takes. I knew, okay, now he's going to go. And that's how it was. And he got sick and left. Yeah. But he's still here. You know, my father is here tonight. He's here in spirit. And if you're Mexican, the dead live alongside you. And I've written about that. And I'm so happy that my father's love, this is something I've written about. I wanted to share it with you tonight, but we didn't have time, that love never dies. That's the most wonderful thing. If you have experienced a death, you learn, if you're connected to things of the spirit, if your heart is open and you listen, you will see that love never dies. And that's a wonderful thing. They should put that on CNN, you know? That's a wonderful thing that I learned with my father's death.
I mean, it's a wonderful segue to one of the questions I had here, which
What is
is to tell us about two things: the Macondo Writers Workshop and the Alfredo Cisneros de Moral Foundation, and what those two names mean, and what kind of work is being done under those two names.
Well, first I have to tell you that when I moved to Mexico 6 years ago, I closed the Alfredo Cisneros because I didn't want to keep doing all the paperwork and the fundraising and all that. But, you know, we had a good run, like 15 years, something like that. That's a good run. And Macondo Foundation is still in existence. It's a writer's workshop for writers who are activists. And I learned that I didn't belong in the academy when I was teaching at Berkeley. And, you know, I wanted to skip class, but I was the instructor. You know? That's not good. That's not a good sign. And I said, now, why do you not want to go to class? I don't like it. Why don't you like it, Sandra? Because they aren't really there to write. They just want to raise their GPA. I said, okay. Well, one day, when you can afford to, you're going to start your own workshop, and no one will be allowed to come unless you invite them. And you will only work with people who are serving their communities and making the world better. That's who you need to work with, and you'll do that one day. And we're going on 25 years. 25 years. And there are 2 Macondo writers here, and Diana Delgado and Marisol. Where's Marisol? Here you go. Stand up, Macondista, stand. Yay, Macondo. And you could be any color, any age to apply for Macondo, but the members themselves read your applications and decide who gets in. It's just for a couple of days in the summer, and we have a wonderful family. It's our chosen family that supports and understands our writing and knows is important, and we network. And so if anything happened to me, even if I hadn't written a book, I would be proud because of Macondo and the work it does. It's going on its 25th year, and we're always looking for donations, so any millionaires out there?
On that note, in terms of thinking about the academy and our belongings in it, I still, again, for the students in the audience, there were some people you met early on in your career who were important to how you shaped yourself and thought about yourself as a poet. I'm thinking of people like Norma Alarcón.
Yes.
Could you talk about some of those people to the students in the audience?
I think that, we have people that come in our lives that are like our spirit mothers and our spirit fathers, our spirit brothers and sisters. And Dr. Norma Alarcón, when I met her, was just like Norma Alarcón. She was a graduate student at Bloomington, Indiana, and I did a reading there, and that's how I met her. And I stayed overnight at her house because we didn't have money. And then she said, "Can I come and visit you in Chicago?" And I said, "Yeah, you can come and stay with me." And she did something real strange for someone who came to visit me. Like, she started opening my closets. She was opening the closets. She was like looking in rooms. She was looking around. I thought, "What's she looking for?" She said, "You live here alone?" I said, "Yeah." And then she said, "How did you do it?" Now, she knew as a Latina woman how hard it had been for me to live without being married, no man around, no baby toys, And when she said that, I just felt the tears come out of my eyes, and that was the beginning of my consciousness as a woman of color feminism. So she was instrumental. And what she did is she invested her whole life without really getting recognition for creating a press, Third Woman Press, and a journal that published me and Ana Castillo and Cherie Moraga and Elena Vidromontes and Gloria Anzaldo. Nobody knew who we were. And she just laid down her life to do this work. And she's in fragile health now. And I want her to know, I always tell her that she planted the seeds and we are her harvest. Yeah.
Honoring the people who helped us along, or poets who inspired us. I mentioned in my introduction, and you write in House of My Own, beautiful essays about Luis Omar Salinas and Gwendolyn Brooks. If you could tell us anything about those two poets, we would love to hear the cuentos.
Luis Omar Salinas, you know, I invited him when I became the literature director at the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center in San Antonio, Texas in 1984. I was a director and I brought people like Cherie Moraga, Elena Vidromontes, that's how I met them, Luis Omar Salinas, Alberto Rios, and I brought a whole bunch of people that I thought were at the forefront. But unfortunately, I also had to bring people that my boss wanted me to bring, that I wasn't so happy with bringing. You know, I had the position, but I didn't really have the power. But at least I got to meet, like, half of the people I invited were people that I admired, and the other people I was obliged to invite. But I still felt very proud and happy to meet these writers, to photograph them, to many times I interviewed them, Pat Mora, Ana Castillo. I interviewed each one. I still have those tapes there in my archives. Now, they're on little cassettes, you know, but they're there. And later, Miss Brooks, on the other hand, we always call her Miss Brooks, even though she was Mrs. But Miss Brooks, Gwendolyn Brooks, I met her before she knew me as a writer. When I was teaching at Latino Youth Alternative High School, she would have an annual poetry contest to promote the arts to kindergartners all the way to high school. And, you know, our school was like 50 students. We didn't have any money. You know, if you wanted chalk, you had to bring your own chalk. At the end of class, you had to put it in your pocket. It was that kind of school. And for 3 years, my students won the Gwendolyn Brooks Poetry Award, our poor little school. 5 of my students won, I'm very proud to say. And she would have this wonderful luncheon at the University of Chicago. But then I realized, oh man, I'm getting famous for being a teacher of writers. And I knew it was time for me to let go and work on my own. So that's how I first knew her. Later, we would read on the same stage. But I write about running into her at a bakery, a supermarket, and she was buying a cake. And I couldn't believe poets bought cakes. I said, "What are you doing here, Miss Brooks?" She said, "I'm buying a cake." But you could read the essay.
I love that story. I love that Gwendolyn Brooks story. I wanted to see, is Matt Mendez still in the audience? Could you stand up, Matt?
Oh, Matt's here.
He's here. He's the author.
Hey!
He's the author of Barely Missing Everything. I wanted to mention that novel.
And I blurbed that book.
Yeah, and another book you blurbed, which is, for those of you who don't know, this is Sabrina and Corina from Cali Fajardo Anstein, who's a finalist for the National Book Award in Fiction this year.
Yay.
And the reason I mentioned both of those books is I was wondering if you could speak to us about what do you think has changed in the literary community since you started, you know, with Mango Press and Bad Boys all that time ago?
You know, I think something that's changed is that the students, writers, are taking their writing seriously and studying with other writers. And that's really important because back in the day, I had an argument with a very famous Chicano writer who will go unnamed, and he didn't like the Chicano writing. He just felt it was bad. I said, "It's not bad. It's not finished. It's just not finished." And I feel as if the writers now coming up are finishing their work, and they're not looking at just each other's work. They're looking at world literature. So the writing is coming up to world literature standards. That's the beautiful thing that I see. I also think that they're studying with writers like you, writers of color that don't baby them and kick them in the butt and understand what they're saying and make them work harder. I think that's, I don't know what you think, but that's what I think.
It's getting to be a golden age.
It's a renaissance, it really is.
Yeah.
And I think it's a renaissance for poetry too, because when you have turmoil, as we're having, and division in the world, and people saying this is not true and that's a lie, poets come to the fore and speak the truth, because that's what poetry is. You have to tell the truth. If it doesn't tell the truth, it's not poetry. And that's why, for me, it's an exciting time to buy books of poetry, to read poetry, because you notice that, like, you know, when there's trouble in the White House, they don't invite poets. You know? Because they tell the truth.
You know, Sandra, when you were here about a year ago and we had a chance to visit, I got wind of a project you were doing where you were collecting some testimonios, and you were speaking to me about why it's important to not just tell stories, but to start listening to them.
Yeah, I think we're in a time when nobody's listening. And I got a Ford Fellowship, and I've been taping people, stories of people that are undocumented, people that hire the undocumented, people that don't want the undocumented, people that are from and pro. I just decided I'm going to listen. And it's was an important lesson for me, because usually I'm used to saying, oh, wait, I got to tell you this, you know, to listen. And I still have all the tapes. I'm still working on creating something with it. But it's a good lesson for us to sit down with people who don't think like us and listen with a compassionate heart, so we can understand one another and respect each other.
Yeah, con puro amor.
Con puro amor, there you go. Sí.
And really, as the last question before we move on to book signing, it's an easy one, but I think it's a joyous one. I want to know your favorite word in Spanish.
Oy, oy, oy. I like fufurufo.
Not wango? I thought wango.
I like wango too. Fufurufo is a good one. Wango. You know what wango is? Wango is like when you wear underwear too much and the elastic gets all stretched. It gets wango. Wango. Isn't that a great word? It's like when things get all stretched out and worn out, too wide. Those are calzones wangos. Yeah.
It wasn't a trick question, but if you delve into Sandra's poetry, into her work, there's many Spanish words that you can.
Well, you know, I'm living in Mexico now. Like, I'm dreaming in Spanish. I talk to myself in Spanish now, and the poems are coming out in Spanish, and I have to translate them into English. But I make a lot of mistakes. You know, Liliana Valenzuela, my translator, she corrects the mistakes I make, porque si no salen puro guangos.
Yeah.
You know?
Pero muy bonito.
Espero que sí, gracias. Even though they're all about burros, you know?
I have my Saturnino postcard on my
Yeah?
fridge. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. But anyway, Sandra, thank you so much for gracing us. For this
Thank
evening.
you so
We
much.
Appreciate it so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
That's just 1 second. Yeah, that was great.